Hi, today we're playing Gunfire Reborn, which is a action first-person shooter roguelite game in which you trawl through randomly generated dungeons, pick up randomized loot, and shoot the baddies and try and get as far as you can. And hey, this is totally up my alley for a few reasons. First of all, I'm a fan of a roguelite in which you progress between runs, and the further you get per run helps contribute, more quickly, more efficiently to your cross-run growth, and then you can kind of feel yourself growing stronger and empowered. And it's not just about how skilled you are at the game itself, but also about your progression through the game in terms of, in this case, talent points that you've invested into. And it's not the first-person shooter roguelite I've played, because I've played Strafe and I've played Immortal Redneck, which I think is a lesser-known one. But it is probably my favorite in terms of how it deals with weapon randomization, because it doesn't go full Borderlands, right? It doesn't completely randomize weapons every single time. Instead, you unlock specific weapons which will have a name and a design and stuff like that, and then you roll random affixes on them, such as certain elemental damage, or like I noticed one time I had a gun which sped up the further through the magazine you fired, and then when I got it this time around, it did not do that. I thought it was an inherent trait of the gun, but it is not. It was an affix that I had last time and did not have this time. And the reason I love that so much is because the guns still have an identity to them. This rainbow gun that I'm shooting right now is always going to work this way, if you know what I mean. It's always going to shoot this laser beam of constant damage into an enemy. That's what this rainbow gun is. And I love that because it reminds me of, despite it being a completely different genre, it reminds me of Ratchet and Clank. Ratchet and Clank might be a third-person action platforming game, but it also specialized in having super unique weapons which acted in interesting ways. My love of Ratchet and Clank growing up nurtured this love of unique weapons in games, and this is one of those games that is actually, paying off on that front. Just from a gameplay perspective as well, I love just being able to recognize a gun at a glance. Like, I see a Tempest later on and I just know that it's going to be the crossbow which fires in kind of a horizontal line. That's pretty cool to just know at a glance. It also makes unlocking new weapons feel pretty nice. You unlock new weapons as you go through, and you do certain not achievements, because they don't show up as Steam achievements, but you do certain milestones like kill a certain amount of bombers and stuff like that. And there's actually a fair amount of weapon variety in this game as well. Like I said, it's not like Borderlands where they randomly generate them and there's millions of combinations or whatever, but because of that, this weapon pool of, I think it's like 50-60 weapons have such personality and instant recognition to them that it really works for the game. There are also various characters you can play as. I've yet to unlock any extras myself, but yeah, as you level up, you can unlock new characters, and they will have their own kind of perks. Like this guy, he can shoot out an orb which freezes enemies in place, and he can also throw out a smoke grenade, usually, which does some sort of poison gas effect. And of course, as you're playing through these dungeons and looting, these goblets in chests and stuff, as you're seeing now, I'm picking modifiers to those abilities. So I can only imagine that playing a different character with different abilities is going to be a decent bit of fun in terms of varied gameplay. Also, another thing I want to say about this game, it just plays really well. It just all comes together in such a nice package. Like, it's kind of scratching the Destiny 2 itch for me. I haven't played Destiny 2 since the end of Shadowkeep, and I'm never going back to that game for reasons. And the main thing I miss about Destiny 2 is that first-person shooter gameplay of, like, you've got these unique guns which act differently. In fact, what is basically the Destiny 2 gun system? You've got the core identity of the gun, and then you've got random affixes on them which slightly alter the way each gun feels. But there are situations you get into later in these runs which just get so hectic, and just knowing you have this moveset that you can fall back on and rely upon to kind of like help get you out of situations, like I'm going to freeze this guy, I'm going to throw this grenade into this group of people, I'm going to swap into this gun which is better for short range. It all just flows together so well. And it's funny because I know someone who's got 200 hours in this game, and when they told me that this was one of their favorite games of all time, I was kind of like, Really? Because I played this game when it first came out in early access, I believe, and it came to Xbox Game Pass around that time. I don't know if it was at the very beginning of its like development or whatever, but I did play it back then, and I thought it was fun. I thought it was fine. And then I kind of forgot about it, and as it turns out, that was about 4 years ago now. Where the hell does the time go? Actually, no, I went and double checked that. It was 3 years ago, to the day that this video is coming out, that it was on Game Pass, so that's interesting. Maybe this is just a specific time of year when they do big updates, because the reason I'm even playing this game is because it had a free weekend on Steam. And I'm averse to free weekends because I know that if, you know, the whole point of a free weekend is to get you to download a game, play it, and then go, ah, dang, I'm really enjoying this game, I'm gonna buy it. If a game has a free weekend on Steam, and I want to play it for free, logic dictates that, you know, I'm going to end up wanting to buy it or I'm going to be disappointed in it, and that just kind of seems counterintuitive to my brain. But I'm easing up on that a little bit in recent years, and I decided, sure, I'll download the free weekend and I'll see how far the game has come since I last checked it out. And I own the game now. The main surprise for me with this game is that it has a seasonal structure, like a live service game. We are currently on Season 6, and on higher difficulties there are seasonal affixes, like I believe this time around there are dice which you can pick up which roll and do random things. I haven't seen any of that stuff myself yet, but also there is a pass in which you can make your way through, and I believe get like cosmetics. There's nothing too crazy on there, it's mostly like profile stuff, but there's a couple of, you know, there's like, I think they're weapon skins, although they might just be outright weapons, I'm not sure. Because there's a bow on there, and there was what I think might be an SMG. But yeah, I've seen nowhere in the game that allows me to change skins for my weapons, but maybe they're skins, I'm not sure. But the main thing is it's all free. There's paid DLC for this game if you want to add new content to it, but the cosmetic stuff and the seasonal stuff is all just free, which is wonderful. Surprise, surprise, indie games know how to do this stuff right, and AAA games are just greedy about it. Who would have guessed? But not only are they adding new seasons with updates, but they're just continually updating the game, obviously with some DLC packs, but I believe they're also just adding free updates to the game as well, so that's nice. So yeah, I was not expecting to like Gunfire Reborn as much as I do, but here we are. It's just so much fun, and there's so much progression ahead of me in terms of talent trees and characters to unlock and all that good stuff. I'm so excited to keep playing this game. Honestly, my biggest gripe with roguelites as a genre is just the repetitive nature of going through the same environments every single time, but I think this game's nature as a first-person shooter, I think, dulls that problem a little bit. Like, I wouldn't say they've done much to solve the problem, because the rooms that I'm fighting through here are the rooms that I was fighting through previously, obviously a little bit randomized in layout and enemy types and all that, but it's not got a huge amount of variety to it in those terms. Maybe the DLC mixes things up early game, I don't know. But because it's a first-person shooter, I feel like those things aren't quite as important to me as they would be in something like, say, Hades. Although that's a bad example because Hades is gorgeous. But even Hades does run into that problem of, you know, maybe it's just my brain and the way I approach games, but, you know, I'll finish a run and I very rarely, no matter how much fun I had in that run, feel the pull to do another run. To go, oh man, I got so far in that run, I bet I could do that again, but I want to try this build, you know. Instead I go, oh man, that was so fun. I don't want to start from scratch, I'll play more of this another time. And Gunfire Reborn is one of the only roguelikes I've played, or roguelites, or whatever you want to say, to actually make me go, yeah, I want to do another run right away, just because the base gameplay is that fun. But anyway, that's pretty much all I have to say about Gunfire Reborn for the moment, transitioning smoothly into just a very quick throwaway topic based on something I saw on Blue Sky today, and I'm recording this on the 26th, so this is out of date as I say it, but today is the PlayStation 2's 25th anniversary. Oh, or at least it is in North America, god damn it. Anyway, it will be in November. Anyway, it was a good excuse to talk about the PS2 on Blue Sky, and people were basically doing the trend of like, drop your 4 top PS2 games. And so obviously I put Ratchet & Clank 2 and Jak and Daxter as my top 2, and then I had a very difficult time deciding on the other 2 games I was going to include, because I feel like there are so many that vie for those particular spots for me. And as I'm talking about this, I am remembering that back in April of this year, I put out a video called my top 10 PlayStation 1 games, and I was intending to do that for each and every console that I have played, and I do still intend to continue that series. But the reason I slowed down on that is because the PS2 is so girthy that it is difficult to kind of like measure to make sure I'm remembering every game that I want to include, but also it has slipped my mind recently, so that's a good reminder to get back on doing that video perhaps. Damn it, now I just want to go record that video. Anyway, after thinking long and hard about it, I decided to settle on LEGO Star Wars 1, the original one, even though most people prefer 2. I have a lot of fond memories of the very original game and, you know, the cantina and all that stuff. And a little game called Road Trip Adventure, and honestly, I think that is my favourite thing about the PlayStation 2, is that its library is so diverse, especially for its time, that there are just so many games that you can mention as like a game that must be your absolute favourite that a lot of people will just have never heard of. And I've definitely got a few of those in my top 10, and I am going to do that top 10 PS2 video, and that was not a spoiler because honestly, I think those two titles I chose there to be alongside Ratchet & Clank and Jak and Daxter probably change every 5 minutes when I think about it. I've yet to really land on a definitive choice. But man, what a console. Anyway, while we're still talking about video games, I also want to mention the other indie game I picked up this week, which is Necesse, which has had its full 1.0 release. For those of you who don't know what Necesse is, think it's kind of like Terraria if Terraria played like Stardew Valley, and by played I mean like in terms of it's a top-down camera and you run around and you click things and you swing your sword in the direction that you're looking and that sort of thing. It's functionally quite similar to another game called Core Keeper, which is another indie hit, but yeah, Necesse, it's a fun game. I haven't sunk all that much time into it yet, but this is the only other game I've ever bothered checking out on a free weekend. So I guess Steam's record for selling me on games during a free weekend is 2 for 2. Hence my earlier, hesitation about doing free weekends. But yeah, what I have played of Necesse so far is fun. I always love those kinds of games where, you're exploring caverns and you're throwing down torches and, the caverns light up, you kind of buffet the monsters away from those areas by lighting up the caverns. You find dungeons and stuff. I always love the Terraria way of doing things where there's these little pots you can break and you will just get things like torches and like shurikens and kind of essential consumables out of them. It makes exploration feel real nice. Honestly, that's probably something Minecraft should consider looking into at this point, although it would probably take them half a year to develop it if it was the main feature of an update. Have some shade, Minecraft, I love you. But I would like to use the back half of this episode of A Weekly Waypoint to talk to you about a weird kind of hyperfixation I've had this week about a smaller segment of a larger hobby I've had for a long time. Good lord, I can't get my words out. And it's to do with comics. For anyone who's been following me for a decent amount of time, you will know that I have been falling further and further down the rabbit hole of comics. I've realized recently how big of a fan of DC Comics I am, and then DC Compact Comics became a thing recently, and I just very recently discovered that they're a thing, and because of that, it's reignited my desire to collect physical comics. Uh-oh, that sounds expensive. And here's the thing. Okay, so here's what I'm getting at. When I first got into comics, I got into comics by picking up some New 52 volumes on the shelves of like Waterstones and stuff, and checking out New 52 Batman, win, and New 52 Superman, win, and New 52 Justice League, win, and New 52 The Flash, who was also present. And then I subscribed to that Legend of Batman Eagle Moss collection and looked away for a couple of years and looked back, and suddenly I had like this stack of Batman comics, which I still have not read most of. However, if you're unaware, I do have a second channel called Kritigri Talks Stories, and on it I am currently reading through all of those Batman comics. I call it the Bat Catalogue. It's reviews, I should clarify, I'm doing reviews of each book as I read it. We're currently up to The Long Halloween, which ironically was not part of the Eagle Moss collection. I had to go get that my dang self. Anyway. After that, I discovered Marvel Unlimited and DC Universe Infinite, and I spent the the last many years just almost exclusively reading digital comics as a subscription service, and I was very happy in doing so, and I'm still very happy in doing so. Here's the thing, I'm about to talk about multiple methods in which you can read comics, and every single one has its benefits and drawbacks, and I legitimately love every single option for their benefits. When it comes to subscriptions, you can just marathon. You can just pick the Mark Waid run of Daredevil and read all of it for, like, you know, the price of 1 month's subscription fee if you do it fast enough, which you probably will because Mark Waid's pretty good at that stuff. Don't know why I chose that example though, because I actually am not a big fan of Mark Waid's Daredevil, but he is a good writer. But yes, when I discovered the infinitely more affordable, not infinitely, that's not how mathematics works, but the much more affordable DC Compact comics, I started grabbing some, and I now have, I believe, 9 volumes, plus a Marvel Premiere Collection Daredevil book, and I loved them. I legitimately loved them so much. But I'm starting to miss the old trade paperbacks, you know, for their bigger art and their slightly nicer paper quality and all that good stuff. So for the first time in at least a decade, I believe, I have ordered a trade paperback. My Compact Comics copy of Deceased was delayed, and eventually I emailed Forbidden Planet and they were like, yeah, our restock didn't come in and it's not getting reprinted until next year. So I decided to just go ahead and order the trade paperback. That order has also been delayed, so I don't know if I'm going to get it by Halloween, which is kind of a bummer. But the problem is now I'm sitting here, I'm going, man, I sure do want a lot of physical comics again. I didn't care. For the longest time I did not care. But now I'm like, am I going to read this on a subscription? Or am I going to wait so that I can get it physically? Or, even worse, am I going to collect physically a comic which I already read on a digital subscription because I love it so much? I'm thinking Absolute Batman Volume 1, Absolute Wonder Woman Volume 1, Absolute Superman Volume 1, and Ultimate Spider-Man Volume 1. Those are some trade paperbacks that I would like to pick up at some point when I have some fresh disposable income. Now would be a good time to mention that you can like and subscribe to support the channel, and maybe one day we'll have a Patreon. But yeah, I was trying to follow the Absolute Universe and Ultimate Universe comics monthly as the single issues came out on the digital subscriptions, but I just found that I kept forgetting what was happening month to month, and I kept forgetting to keep up with them. So honestly, collecting the trade paperback volumes might be a good idea because those will come out probably every 6 months or so, and it feels less ephemeral that way, you know. It feels like I'm actually collecting something tangible that I can look back on, and look back on fondly as well. But that's not the only thing I want to talk about when it comes to comics this week, because in the spirit of proving to you that just because I'm suddenly realizing I want to collect physical comics doesn't mean that I'm suddenly done with comic subscriptions of the digital variety, that was a really long-winded segue, sorry. I've finally been bitten by the I would like to also read some non-Marvel and DC graphic novels bug. And for a long time, I was kind of like, well, I don't really know the landscape of non-Marvel and DC comics, nor do I think that there's any kind of subscription service out there for me to go and explore stuff without having to commit to buying, you know, trade paperbacks or something. Well, the first thing I did was I researched. I did the whole, I'll just type into YouTube top 10 non-Marvel and DC comics, and there sure are a bunch of videos about that. And then I went looking for where they are sold, and I discovered Global Comics. Actually, I rediscovered Global Comics. I found this place, like, a while ago. And by place, I mean app. Sorry, I'm being subsumed by the internet. But I don't know if this was the case last time I looked, but they have a subscription service now. And on that subscription service, alongside Marvel and DC, by the way, Marvel newly arriving, I think, recently to the place, but they also have Image Comics and IDW Comics and Dynamite Entertainment Comics, and a whole bunch of smaller and independent comics on, like, their gold subscription, which is, I think it's £5.99 a month. This is not an ad. Other comic services are available. For instance, I personally don't see why you would subscribe to this for Marvel and DC books when there's a limited selection compared to what Marvel and DC offer themselves on their own apps. But this is the place to be, at least while I familiarize myself with a bunch of the alternative comics out there. I keep trying not to say independent comics, because Image Comics are not independent comics. IDW Comics are not independent comics. But they are frequently mislabeled as such. I think perhaps we should use the term alternative comics Although that does inherently assume some Marvel and DC superiority, which is currently true, but maybe shouldn't be assumed to always be true in the future. Whatever, we'll call them alternative comics for the sake of sanity. So yeah, I've been having a look around their service, and there is a ton of options there. I already was kind of growing this wish list of mostly Image comics that I wanted to check out, and I'm happy to report that most of them are on there. The poster child of Image comics these days, of course, is Invincible, and I am reading Invincible. I know it's like the most basic Andy, like, I'm not reading Marvel and DC, but I'm gonna read the closest thing to it there is option out there. But Invincible is well regarded for a reason. It's incredible. I watched the first season of the Amazon Prime show when it came out. I haven't been subscribed to Amazon Prime for a long time though, so I fell behind on the show. I know season 4 is coming out soon, but I decided to just read the source material because apparently it's very, very, very highly regarded. And I am currently just starting volume 7, which that's what I mean when I say that if you pick up a digital comic subscription service, you can really just fly through a bunch of material. And let me tell you, I'm having such a good time. I am itching to go and try out some non-superhero comics. I do very much feel like I've just chosen like the most obvious like alternative comic out there, but I mean, I'll get to it. If I've got through this many volumes in like 2 days, it's not going to take me long to read the entirety of Invincible, even if it is a whopping 25 volumes. And when I say volumes, I mean like trade paperback volumes. And it's just fun to look at all that and think, how much would this cost me if I were to buy it physically? Or even digitally? Because you can also buy comics digitally on that service. But yeah, long-time viewers of the channel may remember a weekly waypoint where I was talking about experimenting with a free 1-month trial of Kindle Unlimited and seeing what they had in the graphic novels department. I weirdly just kind of used that to check out DC Comics, even though I already had a DC Universe Infinite subscription. I was just curious about the fact that they collected them in like the collected trade paperback volumes, but digitally, so it was that kind of different experience of seeing them as books instead of runs and single issues and stuff like that. Did not continue after that free trial, but there was some stuff on there that I remember being like, I'm not going to get to check that out now. Well, most of that is on here. Of course, they don't have everything, like, despite having a whole bunch of IDW stuff, they don't have any of the Doctor Who stuff that IDW have been doing, which is a bit of a bummer. I was kind of hoping to check that out, but you know, maybe all that stuff will show up in a Humble Bundle one day. It probably already has before at some point and I just didn't notice, because that is another thing that I'm going to try and keep an eye on, Humble comic bundles, because actually I'll tell you what set off this whole I want to go check out alternative comics thing was I was looking into a Humble bundle. It was the, let me go check. They currently have an Image Comics bundle of Kieran Gillen's works, such as The Wicked and the Divine, and Phonogram, and there's a recent one called Power Fantasy people seem to love as well, and there's one called Die. And I was considering picking that up just to kind of like get started on looking into alternative comics that aren't necessarily superhero comics even. But hey, would you look at that, most of that stuff is in the global comics subscription. Of course, there's still the whole, you know, reading it in a subscription versus owning a digital copy of it argument to be had. Humble do supply DRM free stuff, so it is actual ownership, hooray! Very rare in the digital space of anything nowadays. But yeah, just in general, that's where my mind is at regarding comics. It might be fun to kind of give you a brief overview of the kinds of comics that I've been looking into and am interested in checking out. So this is going to be a bit of a greatest hits of Image Comics, I'm afraid, just because that's what my research has skewed towards so far. But obviously I've already mentioned Invincible. I've heard really good things about Saga and East of West. They sound really fun. There's also Radiant Black, that sounds fun, and I'm very curious about Rook Exodus as well. Those all sound like comics that I want to check out. But to get away from Image, there's also, you know, they don't have all of the Umbrella Academy on this subscription, but they do have most of it. I might check that out. There's, I did also forget to mention The Walking Dead. I'm not a huge zombies guy, but that might be fun to check out. But anyway, they have White Sand, the Omnibus by Brandon Sanderson, which I was planning on picking up at some point, so that's cool. There's also Spawn, that's also Image Comics. Anyway, if you have any recommendations for me, please feel free to drop them in the comments and I'll go have a look. But I remember I was watching those videos about recommending non-Marvel and DC comics, and there were a bunch which just the premise caught my imagination. I was like, I would love to read that. And honestly, I've yet to type all of those into this particular subscription search engine to see if they have it. And yeah, if you want to kind of keep up with me and you know, come on this alternative comic reading journey with me, you can go subscribe to Kritigri Talks at Kritigri Talks, which is my reviews channel, where I'll probably be talking about a whole bunch of these. I'll certainly be talking about Invincible after I'm done reading through it. I kind of want to see what Elf Quest is all about. That looks like a bit of an older title though. It's funny because Global Comics have this kind of sidebar where they have like their main publishers, and they kind of want you to click on them and like look through all of their stuff, a bit like, you know, Disney Plus tabs or something like that. And you look through them and you kind of get a general idea of the kinds of vibes that each publisher has. And I'm clicking through them, right, and Image Comics feels very artsy, feels very unique, feels very like, if you have a wild concept, pitch it to us and we might do something with it. Whereas Dark Horse feels very kind of like heavy metal in some ways. I guess that's Hellboy, but they also have like a fair amount of licensed IP as well. And then you go to IDW and it's even more licensed IP, except whereas Dark Horse has like, you know, Stranger Things and The Witcher and Cyberpunk and all that stuff. IDW have like, well, they used to have Transformers, and they have Sonic the Hedgehog and Teenage Mutant Ninja Turtles, and stuff like that. A lot of Star Trek as well, which I already own from an old Humble Bundle, and a lot of Godzilla as well. Apparently they do Godzilla comics. And then you check out Dynamite Entertainment, and I'm gonna be real, my first impression is, oh man, these guys love boobies. These guys love boobies. And maybe I'm judging a comic by its cover here, but I look at Vampirella, and I look at Red Sonja, and I look at, Xena's not quite as egregious, but some of the Xena stuff, and I'm like, oh, this feels like women written by men for men a little bit, and I don't know if I'm gonna... kind of morbid curiosity does kind of pull me towards it, since it's already part of a subscription. I'm like, oh, maybe I do want to check that out. But yeah, a lot of that seems like a product of the 80s that is still hanging around today. Let me know if it's actually good, because honestly, I would be interested in reading a comic about a vampire. But yeah, some other stuff that I'm interested in, which I think I've looked up and is not on the Global Comics service, would be like Judge Dredd. I think could be kind of fun to check out. I already mentioned the IDW Doctor Who comics. I think it's... no, it's not IDW, is it? It's Titan Comics. Is it Titan? I think it's Titan Comics. Hang on, let me go check. Yeah, it's Titan Comics. That would explain why it's not on a service. There's no Titan Comics on Global Comics for some reason. Maybe they have their own thing that I need to go check out someday. Ah, you know what? I'm just going to go look that up too. Yeah, unless I'm missing something, I don't see Titan Comics being on any kind of subscription service anywhere. But I do think Global Comics is a fairly new and recent idea, so maybe that'll change one day too. But anyway, this has been a very info-dumpy episode so far. Thanks for sticking with me. As I mentioned, it is kind of like... what I've spent most of my week doing is like looking into and researching and finding ways to get and read these comics. And yeah, I've been making spreadsheets, I've been watching videos, I've been making videos. I've kind of allowed this to eat into my like gaming hobby time. I've spent a lot more time reading instead, like reading comics and looking up comics and watching videos about comics and all that good stuff. I feel like I've just discovered Netflix for the first time and I'm just so excited. So again, if you have any recommendations for me for comics to check out, either that are or are not on the service, but preferably comics that are not Marvel or DC, because I've spent the last decade familiarizing myself with Marvel and DC, and while I'm gonna happily continue to keep keep reading those, I also wish to branch out, because there are so many fantastic ideas which just do not fit into either of those universes and make the comic space a more vibrant and wonderful place for existing outside of those universes. But in the meantime, I am going to continue to read 4 by Dan Jurgens over on Marvel Unlimited, and I am going to continue to read my Bat catalogue, and I am going to continue... actually no, I did cancel DC Universe because I didn't want to have 2 monthly digital comic subscriptions. I pay for Marvel Unlimited yearly. But I do still have a few compact comics that I have not yet read, which came recently. So yeah, DC train ain't gonna stop either. Good lord, I just keep piling more avenues of reading things simultaneously onto myself. But anyway, as you can see, I've been downed. I am down and out. So thank you for checking out today's episode of A Weekly Waypoint. If you enjoyed it, please consider leaving a like, and I will catch you in whatever I make next.